What's I going to talk about? Jesus. Oh, I know. We was trying to think what we were going to talk about tonight, and I thought, well, if nothing else, I haven't done it in a while. Let me tell you all the terrible things that happened in my personal life. I shouldn't do that. People are going to be, saying, running the phone, calling their friends saying, hey, there's finally a good show on cable. There's been some marbles. This kind of frightening when somebody, even though they're acting, can do that real well. It makes. All right. You're not allowed to do emotional things on cable unless you can prove. You have to bring in an affidavit to prove that you were insincere. What we're doing for you people out there, besides planning to break into your homes when you're gone this weekend. Well, you won't send any contributions, so fair is fair. What we're doing here, see, just right quick, at least you think that there is no rhyme or reason to this, which, by the way, is not true because there was no man named Tucker. I do know a few rhymes. I mean, some things I picked up to the last Southern Baptist Convention. So. What we're doing here is, what are we doing here? Is outside of this, whatever this is, but outside, beyond trans this. I have, believe it or not, said, written, and just, staggered around and written things in the snow other than here, and we have had throughout some period of time contacts from other people on this planet, mostly, that made sort of a, shall we say, a request, like, would you say something further along those lines? Well, at least that's some of the nicer things they've said. So what we've done is this. Yes, what we've done is this. We have collected those along the way, and of course, contacting the Public Service Commission and the Post Office when it was appropriate about some of the communiques that is. But the others that were not inflammatory or against the decency of the community, calm and peace, these we have collected, and what we're trying to do here now is periodically going back and drawing upon this cache of requests for additional comments of things I've said, written, done, wrecks I've had, things I've written in the snow, and, well, doing magic tricks with both hands. And so we're going back now, and we have arranged sparing no expense. Well, based upon the amount of money that you people out there in cable's been sending to us, you'll see what kind of machine we were shooting for. Some kind of one of these computer sorters that we could, just like mash a button and the machine would just go through and at random shoot out one of these requests that we've collected. That somebody had read something or heard something I'd said outside these shows. But again, I hate to keep making you guys feel bad, because anybody that's sitting home watching TV, you got to feel bad enough to start with. So, I mean, it's obvious you got no friends, you got no sexual partners, and you probably got no sense. But you obviously got no taste, or you wouldn't be there. So, well, at least it proves I'm in the right place. But so what we've done, based upon that, not being able to afford one of those fancy-antsy computer things that sorts and shoots them out, we have, in an appropriate manner, or should I say in a manner appropriate to our fiscal, social, intellectual, cultural position in the general scheme of things, come up with this box. If you can pick it up on camera, and don't ask me how, I don't even want to think about it. But it is supposedly, if it's going to work, I'm going to approach it. It's already on camera. I'm going to approach it slowly, I hope enough not to frighten it. Or, of course, slowly enough that it doesn't frighten me, that it might attack me. and it's supposedly going to put out one of these requests that we've collected, and then I'll look at it, and God knows what will happen after that. But that's to bring you up to date. So, I'm going over now, and let's see if it works. Oh! Do. Well, and also you people out there, some of these, the people really took down what they thought was some quote, something I'd actually said, and asked for a comment. So some of these, if it's going to turn out this way, because I have not looked down beforehand, and at no time do my fingers leave my hands and all that. But the only reason I threw it in, I guess on TV, since everyone's just primed and you've already been accustomed to being fooled, not just on TV, but TV is a great example. You're inclined to be fooled in life. That is, somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hello, what a beautiful house you have. My crew and I were just doing a roofing and siding job down the street, and we had all this stuff left on the truck, and rather than drive it all the way back and go to the great expense of taking it back to the yard, we were just driving along, and we all turned to each other, and we went, wow, what a beautiful house. Won't we stop and see that nice lady? We'd like to take advantage since we got the leftovers, see?" Assuming, of course, I was going to say, assuming that you understand that's a scam, it just suddenly struck me that if you're watching TV, you probably don't know it's a scam. You'd probably go, wow, is this my lucky day? Because I guess you're the people that keep on seeing all those things in through the mail that, you may have won $40 million. At any rate, I know how accustomed you are to somebody saying, well, now I hadn't planned this, but gee, I just noticed that the vice president is here in the studio audience, and I don't know what he has to say about me, but won't you stand up, Vice President, and just tell the good people what you think of me personally? That kind of thing. And assuming you got some wits, somewhere along the line you're going to think, I'm not so sure that was all spontaneous and unplanned. You know what I mean? So I was just pointing out, which though it should become evident shortly, that I was going to point out that this was not just a scam of me saying, I haven't seen this, and so I don't know what it is, and I don't know what I'm going to say. Rather than doing that as a preface for something that's planned, so that you would then, when I really start rolling, you go, wow, he had never seen that and thought about it, and just on the spur of the moment, he could just intellectually improvise. Wow! Since that's not going to happen, I mean, it's going to be obvious I'm not lying to you. All right? Of course, it could be this. It's all planned, and this is part of the plan to make you think, well, it's not planned, and so your expectations are lower, and then I really get to going, and you think, I would have been really impressed if he'd planned this. But he pointed out it wasn't planned, and at first I thought, well, it's true, because he kind of stumbled around. It was like, well, I'm not sure. I don't remember saying this. But then he got going, and then be even more impressed. You understand? No? Have you ever been in a hall of mirrors? Have you ever been in a tunnel of love by yourself and enjoyed it? So here it goes. Here it is. Of course, I did all that so I could read this and try to figure out what to say. So you didn't realize that. I wish I'd thought to do that when I was... All right, here it is. It's a fairly long quote that they're attributing to me, and how can I deny it? After you hear it, and after you've heard this 10 minutes, if you've never seen this before, you'll hear this and probably go, I don't understand it, but I believe you said it. Thanks a lot. At least I ain't sitting home watching TV. I think it was a story I made up, but anyway, here's what it goes with somebody in a story. It says, when you're born, life sticks a cheap billfold in everyone's back pocket. And in the billfold is a cheaply reproduced photograph of yourself. And it's up to a man who can think for himself to discover all this, and after that, who knows? Does that sound at all familiar? Does it sound... I don't know whether we should talk about it, because that would be so easy to take one short jump, especially if you're sitting home there and drinking a cheap beer, is just think things about cheap billfolds and a cheap photograph of yourself. That sounds like some kind of cheap version of psychology. And I, for one, don't think that psychology is in any position to be cheapened any further. So, see, now that's the way it's going to work, assuming it's going to work. So now, I hate to push fate. It worked once, but are you as impressed as I am? Two. There are two kinds of prejudiced travel agents, those who have never been anywhere and those who have. And it seems to have some sort of punchline or moral. It says, a man who can think does not seek specious advice. God, I don't understand it either. Could you look upon what we have been calling around here the intellectual secondary world of men as being one totally composed of, all right, we'll make it easy. We'll slip up. Take a few seconds. In part, composed of advice going from one person to another. Now, you can say that man's intellectual world, by that I mean anything that's not just the animalistic, physical level of humanity. That anything else you could say, all cultures and arts, etc., you could say that it amounts to something else, that it has other parts to it, that architecture has stone, that art, the plastic arts, has marble, oil, watercolor. But that's still not it. It is really composed of advice. It is composed of words. It is composed of ideas. If you want to start off easy, but jump from ideas to what keeps it going. You might not have wanted to say advice, because we could just say words. But then let's take it a bit further and say advice. If we get past the point of fairly mundane, ordinary affairs, when men are getting into the areas that they think are in some way potentially extraordinary, religion, morality, philosophy, understanding, wisdom, just almost anything other than, hey, which way is it the bus station? Anything beyond that, you could say is a matter of advice in the widest possible expanse of advice. Is the mic all right? That is, people are continually not just seeking professional advice, but even amongst themselves, the social intercourse between people. It is a constant seeking. Would feedback help for a second? Is that more in your intellectual milieu? That you're continually seeking that. You know, if you're staying at a bar and talking to a stranger of the opposite sex and say, what's your sign? You know, how often do you come around here? You know, hi. All of that is a matter of seeking feedback. You're inviting people to dance, but you're in a sense also asking for advice. You're asking, what do you think of me? What do you think of my approach to you? You are continually, when you talk to people, one more time, you can find exceptions, but they're meaningless. Because the exceptions have to do with very minor affairs, is what I meant by which way is the bus station, what time is it, that you can say to somebody. That goes on constantly, and it's not that it's not necessary, it might be important, but when you move up just a little beyond those kind of ephemeral hit and run between people, then in a sense you're soliciting advice, and when you get just a little higher up, which most people in life, except people who stay home and watch TV, are normally aspiring to something, shall we say, a bit intellectually or culturally higher. And so you're seeking advice, such as going to a priest, a rabbi, going to your mother, going to somebody that you know and you respect. You're constantly asking for advice. If any of you say, well, I don't ever ask for advice because all I do is sit home and drink beer and watch TV. You're still asking for advice because you're seeking advice from what seems to be the information, the electronic information flowing through your TV set. You're seeking advice like, how should I live? What should I think? Why the hell am I watching this program? But you are in general still seeking a kind of information. You're seeking a kind of response from life like, why am I here? You know, there's got to be something a little bit better than me sitting here drinking cheap beer and watching cheap cable shows. Now back to what I am credited with having said, or accused of having been said. It's your choice. There are two kinds of prejudiced travel agents. Those who have never been anywhere and those who have. You can look at travel agents further as being all forms of institutions, if that makes it a little easier. But you should be able to take it into a non-specific world of ideas rather than institutions. But if you want to look on the basis that a person will go solicit advice, information, direction from a religion. And you might do it via a book. You might go buy a book. You might turn on a TV show. You might buy a tape series, How to Be a Better Person. It could be psychologically based. It could be religious based. But you are, again, seeking advice. In this case, I put it, supposedly, as a travel agent. And I put it as there are two kinds of prejudiced travel agents, not giving any leeway. That is, if we want to retranslate this, which is my Bach, so I can scratch it if I want to and improvise, it is saying that they're only prejudiced travel agents, which, in case you'd never thought about it, that's all they are. That is, if you go seek advice, they're prejudiced. You might not want to use the word prejudice, but most of you have sensibilities that are far too sensible anyway. Genteel. Sissy. Ill-founded. Provincial, non-profitable. That's just amongst some of us, not necessarily you watching. So anybody who has advice is by their very nature prejudiced. Now, of course, to them, they're not prejudiced, they're on the right side. But if you go and you seek advice from a priest, the advice is going to be prejudiced in that he is not going to give you the same kind of advice and direction and good common sense that you might get from a Muslim minister or from a Mercedes mechanic. So whatever travel advice, whatever direction you get, or even from your mother, the other people do not see it as being prejudiced, but all travel advice is prejudiced. Because all advice is prejudiced, or you won't get any. Because if you went to somebody and say, I would like your opinion on so-and-so, and if they're not prejudiced, they're going to say, hey, I don't even know what you're talking about. Or they're going to say, I got no opinion. Which is really, don't hold your breath, but it can happen. They would normally not put it that way, if you want to think about, get off the subject. And several people went, boy, that'd be nice. Well, it happens to you. People are confronted with being asked for advice, and when they don't know, but notice, they don't want to say, not that they don't know, people admit that, but they don't want to say that they do not have an opinion. They don't want to say, well, I'm not prejudiced enough to have an opinion. They don't mind saying, well, I don't know. But then the inference being, and they'll normally throw in a little bit like, well, I don't know that specifically, but that same area interests me too, and by God, I'll go check on it for you. I'll research it and come back and check with me, and I'll let you know, that is, come back and I'll have my particular prejudice in this area more nailed down. Anything other than say, to express true indifference, to be insouciant. People don't want to say that. They don't know why. But all travel agents, by this inference, are, by their nature, prejudiced. But it says there are only two kinds of prejudiced travel agents, those who've never been anywhere and those who have. So what you have then is, besides if you were trying to interpret it as some kind of cheap bus station attempt at a Zen egg roll, a jeu de moi, a foolish one perhaps, but unless you're just taking it as being some kind of dumbass cable level version of a play on words, then you got to figure, if it has any meaning, that everybody who has advice is prejudiced. And the reason they're prejudiced is because they either, if it was a travel agent, if we're going to stick with this allegory a second, it's either because they have never been anywhere, which you would probably want to immediately go, aha, that'd explain it, except, or those who have. And that's when you would be left with, this is some kind of trick. It's nothing up my sleeves. It would then be, if we jump from the allegory into this perhaps actually pointing to the kinds of flows of energy that run life, normally referred to as verbal, emotional, intellectual human intercourse, then you're left with this. That all advice is based upon people either knowing what they're talking about or not knowing what they're talking about, which is the same thing. And if I may speak for the choir, who's backstage, they say, well, I can't believe it, but you have actually gone too far based upon what you already started out doing. Translated, that means the show sounded a bit sketchy when I first turned it on, but now I'm getting really frightened. I always like that. People that watch TV and say, well, that kind of disturbs my intellectual sensibilities. Or people that write letters to editors or TV guide or something, railing about the poor quality of TV and, has an intellectual affront. That's people that sit home and watch TV and they complain about it. No offense to TV. I mean, any more than anything else, but. And it says, a man who can think for himself, it seemed to be the punchline, if there was one at the time I originally said this, assuming again that I did, but with the box lie. A man who can think for himself doesn't seek specious advice. Not spurious, not illegitimate, not incorrect advice, but specious advice. That is, advice that on the surface, it appears to be all right. And since I am translating myself, I don't mean that the advice seems to be either true or false to start with, but the point is that the advice seems to have some validity. That is, that you go to a travel agent and say, should I consider at all going to Matamoros? Since we all know and love, well, that's where one of our branch offices. It's not if the person says, oh no, don't ever go to that part, don't go to any border town there or in New Mexico. It's not that the advice is bad, because they might say the chances are you're either going to get a strange disease or rolled, which, so I hear that could be fairly substantial, usable advice. I'm not saying that the advice is either right or wrong. What I'm saying is on the surface, there seems to be some pertinence, there seems to be some legitimacy for the source of the advice, right? That's where the specious comes in. Not that the advice, not that the content of what a priest or a rabbi, the culture's, the civilization's sense of morality, it's not that what they're saying is either true or false. It is that to begin with, it's like you walk in and it's signs that say hamburgers for sale, and whatever they serve you, it's not whether you know whether you like it or not, or whether they fix it the way you want it. You just assume that's legitimate, that you go in and say, could I have some sort of hot sandwich, preferably with some meat in it? And it seems to be that, you go, yes, and it seems as though you're in the right place. That you walk in, it looks to be a cathedral or some holy place, and you say, I'm here for spiritual information, and somebody goes, aha. That so far, so good. Forget what they're going to say, it just seems to be legitimate insofar as the place from which you are soliciting information, and they agree, yes, this is it. That's where specious comes in. That a man who can think for himself does not solicit, does not seek specious advice. Then the trick is, if there was one, is to think, well, how would one know if the advice is specious or not? Simple. Finally, something simple. From a certain view, all, yes, that's right, all advice is specious. Maybe I can use my wily powers. Did they ever find his body? That plane crashed. My wily powers to perhaps conjure up one of a more, I don't know, erotic or something to do with sports. Ah! Ooh. This is one of those strange, I'll tell you right quick, people. Some of these I do recall. Some of these I will not protest that I did not write or say. This is one that's just a 4-word, one-liner, but I do recall that it was a part of a short-lived series at the time it was said, and so I'll have to, assuming I can. This one, the request was for, the quote is, Proverbs protect the weak. This, I believe, was like a little 3-line or 3-act scenario, and the other two, the whole thing went, Proverbs protect the weak, maxims minimize uncertainty, and truisms help hide the truth. I'm sure you're all, no intellectual challenge with it, you're all verbal and literate enough that really truisms, proverbs, and maxims are operationally synonymous. But they, in a wider sense, mean much more than just simply something that you would find in a fortune cookie. Because proverbs, at the widest operational sense, are like short, brief job descriptions of all human institutions, of all travel advice. Is why, even though you can, and many people can, scoff at proverbs, especially one that's become hackneyed to the point that it makes a cliche sound original, people can go, who knows all that? That it says, honesty is the best policy. And almost anybody, even an honest man, will say nowadays, if he's sophisticated, well, if somebody really insisted that, listen to me, sir, this is important. This is important. And somebody pulls you over, jumps in front of your car on the highway, and says, you got to hear me. I just suddenly realized, and you go to all this trouble, well, yes, I'm always interested. And they say, I've gotten an unbelievable flash of insight, and I had to share it with someone. And you say, all right, I'm all in favor of insight. And the person says, honesty is the best policy. And you think, yeah, Jesus, I knew that when I was 5 years old. Everybody knows that. So there can be a certain kind of resistance, but that does not take away from the inherent power, the intellectual, it's the electrochemical power actually behind cliches, which, if you will not take it in too strong of a pejorative sense, is really what all maxims, adages, proverbs, truisms, that's what they are. They got to be it's got to be a cliche to you almost, or you wouldn't know it was a proverb. You'd think, well, hey, if you had really led a sheltered life, and I just got through going through this bit, and I said, honesty is the best policy, you might go, wait a minute, God, where's a pencil? You say, you wouldn't even know it was a truism. You wouldn't know it was a proverb. So it has to be cliched in a sense for you to even recognize it as being a proverb. It's almost got to have worn out its intellectual welcome. It's almost got to have lost its intellectual, its electrochemical potency for you to even recognize it as being something worthy of being classified as words of wisdom or a proverb or an adage. So they are worthy of a certain amount of disrespect while simultaneously having an operational value, or they would not be remembered. That even if you said, well, I know that cliche, or I know that proverb, and it is so old, it is so long in tooth, that it is a cliche and meaningless. It may be to you. But remember this, on a broad level, on a wider scale, it is not, or it would not still be repeated. Regardless of some particular view you might have of the person who said it, and you could say, well, that person is so dumb, that person is so provincial in their thinking already that they think a cliche. One that I've known in my life, they suddenly thought it was some great insight, some brilliant new flash of wisdom. Now, you can attack that one person, but you're still missing the point. If we take, I guess this is worn out as any and as old as any, that honesty is the best policy. And you can say, yeah, it's meaningless. You couldn't get me drunk enough to sit here and listen to you talk about, well, now here's a brand new view of the proverb, the truism, that honest is the best policy. You could say, hey, I have thought about that in every way I've heard every possible comment could be made. I'm not going to sit through it. Now, you could say that. And from your view, that could be true. But what I was trying to get you to consider is, since people still say that, and forget the individual who said it, since the information, since the energy behind that term still floats, it still flies, it's still used, ministers, rabbis, preachers still weekly comment on it. It still has a herd, it has a collective value. It is not really a cliche. It continues on a wide range, not necessarily individually in your case or anybody's particular case, but in a wide sense, it is still a proverb in the positive sense. It is still words of wisdom. It is still a kind of goal to which a decent person, a right-thinking person, would aspire. It is a kind of go-get-em motto. Honest is the best policy. By God, that's right. We should all remember that. And we get so tied up in the busy modern day world of trying to get ahead that sometimes we'll take moralistic shortcuts and etc. But kind of thing you should remember. Proverbs protect the weak, maxims minimize uncertainty, and truisms help hide the truth. I guess it's too late. We're already into this show, damn near 35 minutes. It's too late to make much more about the fact that a lot of this sounds as though you're talking about one thing, and if you turn your head a second, you think, wait a minute. I've either lost my mind or he's lost his, because now he's saying just the opposite. I just turned away for a second. I went to the bathroom for a minute, and I came back, and I thought it was going along pretty good, and I came back, and he's talking about the same subject, but now he's taking the opposite position. What kind of bathroom did you go to? Jeez. Proverbs, remember, Proverbs, truisms, etc., can be seen as being, in a most positive way, a brief description of the positive, constructive information that holds society, civilizations together. It is the reality of all the high positive institutions. Honesty is the best policy. You could take that, not necessarily just alone, but you could take that as being emblematic in the highest possible sense of any religion you name in the world, any culture that ever lived, any civilization that ever prospered, any school of philosophy. Not just that, but you could take that and it will fit anywhere on this planet, any time, and any civilization, in any era. And it is just a good shorthand of there is one of the higher aspirations of civilized men. That they know it, they should strive to do it. Honesty is the best policy. Now understand, that's why it survived, that and all the others. But then consider it from a slightly different view. Not the opposite view, so you went to the bathroom too long. It's not the opposite view. It's just I think we're safe in saying a different view. Proverbs protect the weak, maxims minimize uncertainty, and truisms help hide the truth. Now, if I may speak for someone stepping back in the room, zipping up your pants if you're a man, and thinking, well, what did I miss? Well, what you missed is that something is fishy. If truisms, maxims, and proverbs are indeed reasonable, admirable, valid, short descriptions of the higher aspirations, the higher achievements of civilization, then how can it be said that Proverbs, the same things, protect the weak, minimize uncertainty, and help hide the truth? That sounds so important to say, how can you say that other than I can't resist pointing this out? You can say anything you want to. I wish I'd timed it better and I'd just stopped there, I guess, and really annoy some of you people watching this and think, good God. But did you see that was not the point of tonight's show? Pardon me. I hate to laugh in your face. I like it. Somebody write that down so I can remember that the point of tonight's show. But even if, whether you're agreeing or disagreeing, it would appear to be, since there were not dancing girls up here and I was not doing card tricks and not telling anything that seemed to have a punchline right then, if you just turned it on, you were listening to some of that, and us talking about Proverbs and decency and civilization, you could, whatever you thought about the content, you could be assuming, well, this is basically, something serious. It's not a nude 12-step program for recovering alcoholics on cable or whatever the weirdest thing they've got. At least you think, well, it's not that. That it, whatever it is attempted to be serious. And so there it was. We were sort of being serious, and I was pointing out how life looks at important things like Proverbs and wisdom in one view. And I said, but you could walk out of the room a second and come back, and it sounded like I'm taking a different view. And you could say, well, wait a minute. How can it be? And it sounds like a serious question. It's like a philosophical question. I'm backing up where we were. And then I broke I shouldn't have done it, I guess, but I sort of broke the spell of seriousness and sincerity. Well, when I was asking on your behalf, on any intellectual, reasonable person's behalf, well, how can you point out what seemed to be the truth, that Proverbs and et cetera are reasonable statements reflections of men's aspirations, even their achievements? How can you say that and then point out that those same things are protection for the weak, a minimalization of uncertainty, and actually help hide the truth? How can you say that? You remember where we were? I'm backing up. And then I ruined it all by saying, well, if you're alive and you have lips and a tongue that will operate, you can say anything. I backed up for that there. I knew I should have stopped when nobody got anything out of it. I guess we should have been digging down the box. I'm going to have to just add a little bit, having to do with seriousness. Because seriousness is indeed serious. All advice is serious. All travel agents are serious. You do not consult with any travel agent. You do not consult with any philosopher, rabbi, psychologist, anybody who is not serious. If you do, then you're in dire need of all the aforementioned. Or probably a tailor, one who specializes in white canvas. Well, lots of ties on it. I mean, just so you won't hurt yourself. There's always a certain kind of, I guess, figurative danger of me trying to second guess people watching TV, which, of course, itself is funny. Like that is truly an intellectual challenge to try and consider what kind of people are sitting home watching television. To what degree should I treat them with intellectual respect? How much should I sort of take for granted, having to do with their neural level? But to talk about seriousness and to bring it up to the point to philosophically, to rhetorically say, well, how can you say something that sounds to be so irrational when it seems to be going so well right up to that point? I'm backing up and we'll try it again. And then I point out, I'm going to do it with a serious face. I did it already. I thought that'd help. That if you have a functioning tongue, operational lips, and a mouth that in some way just fits into the general scheme of verbal interplay between people, you can say anything. What if we played a game and in some way I could insist that just theoretically that that's the sort of information that people claim that they would die for. That is, that they go out and stand on mountains and look for flying saucers. They try to talk to the dead. And yet you hear it and it can't have any meaning. Well, for one thing, it can't be serious. To say, well, a man can say anything, because anybody can sit there and hear that and go, well, I could have said that. But notice this, you never did. And then you could say, well, the reason I didn't is, I don't know, it's somewhere between non-secularly or non-religiously blasphemous and silly. Why would I say it? Well, you could say it if your mouth and lips move. Yes, but I wouldn't say it. And why? It's because you're a reasonable, you're an intelligent. I know I made jokes about you watching TV, but if you agree with this, then you're reasonable, civilized, sophisticated, intelligent, no matter what your educational level is, and you're full of air. You're just like a balloon. You're stable. If I may further quote the Bach boys and myself, that air is to a balloon as seriousness is civilization. That there are things that must be serious, or life, if you want to look at it as being a balloon toy, a blown up structure, if you take out the seriousness, there is nothing. It will collapse. You can forget. It's the easy way. I know that everyone says, well, if a civilization becomes immoral, or worse yet, they like to say amoral. But if you take away the morality, if you take away the honesty, if you take away the decency, if you take away religious desire, all sorts of things, they say, if you take this away from a civilization, and of course they can always look back at history. I won't tell you what history has to say about that. But they can always look back and say, well, here is an example. If you take the morality away from a people, if you take their religious ideas, if you take their gods away, if you take... That covers most of what's been said. They'll say, just look. Look back at the Greeks. Look at the Phoenicians. Look at the Romans. Look at Genghis Khan. Look what happened. Just mark my words. You took away their religious values. You took away this and that. No. That is a child's view of it. Because what happens, there's only one thing that will collapse that kind of balloon, and that would be to extract the seriousness. I haven't changed the subject. Well, that's easy for you to say. Well, I know it. I got lips. I can still talk a little. I can say it if I want to. I have not changed the subject. You could certainly say that the removal, the loss of a society's religious values will shortly lead to its downfall. Now, you can say that, and you can point it out in history, and you can prove it. You can be satisfied with it. But you look at it this way. Everything that humans do, everything that is singular to humans, such as morality, such as religion, it is all based upon the big S. It's not Savannah, and it's not Schenectady. It's not even San Antonio, for those of you that still like the cities to be in Texas. It is seriousness. And if you doubt that, take the seriousness out of morality. Think about it a second. Take the seriousness out of religion. Take the seriousness out of culture, and what have you got? You got no religion, you got no culture, you got no nothing. It has got to be serious. You just never think about it that way. And I'm not using serious as some sort of wild Doberman to attack ordinary views. It is simply a fact. Still backing up one more time. So no matter what you're talking about, and I was sort of leading, that wasn't the point, but I was sort of leading you along one path, trying to get you to see that Proverbs, words of wisdom, people's advice, it is a kind of neural history, it is a kind of intellectual support group, it is invisible, you do not see it in the same way that you can physically look at the DNA, look at the genetics of humans, and say, well, I know her, she looks just like her grandmother, I used to know her grandmother. They got the same build. Now that she's hit about 30, I can just see it. I can see her from the rear, and I only know the girl. I've only met her once or twice, but I grew up with her grandmother, and I can see it. Everybody knows that. And you can see it in large groups of people. Whole races, whole nations, any way you want to describe it. That is no secret. That's just a fact. But it is not recognized. The closest they get to it is believing there's some kind of ability in the environment of man for psychology to work its wiles on people, and that the nurture of those in a society, in a civilization, in some way will play an adjoining role, if not a predominant role, over the nature, over the genetics of man physically. Then they think that up here, for reasons that we've already been to many times, it's the efficiency of the operation. But men accept this, reasonable, intelligent man, as being in some way at least partially exempt, that is not in the same kind of confining inner structure that controls the physical growth from generation to generation of men, that this is in some way different. There is, whether that's valid or not, which of course it's not, but even be that as it may, there is a non-visible, and it's non-accountable. It's not taken into account by ordinary people. There is a like, and just as real, non-physical, let's just call it intellectual for the time being, genetic background, history, and if you can get your eyes to see it, it's visible. It's just everywhere. It's just as visible as a person's body. It's not mystical, and you don't have to take drugs or to chant or to... It just is to a few people. It's just there. Everything around you tells you it's true. But all of these aspects of this part of man's world that has created a kind of consistent, sequential, reasonable, predictable history of man. That you are what you are intellectually because it seems to fit in with what you are in your neighborhood, in your time and place, in your institutions, whichever ones that you seem to follow. There seems to be a stable place for you, a predictable place. Forget whether you got some complaint about it, but it seems to be where you should be standing, where you should be sitting. This is what I am. This is what I was taught. This is how I grew up. Then all of the proverbs, all the wisdom of your time, your place, whether it be from a religion or whether it just seems to be the common collective wisdom of your neighborhood, of your country, of your nation. If it is not serious, it's not anything. And you have missed the whole point to imagine that in history, or even right now, that things are falling apart moralistically, educationally, intellectually, artistically, politically, economically. That if they're falling apart for some reason, such as the integrity of politics, the certainty of economics, the morality of commerce, the morality of our relationships is being lost. The new generation is ignoring it. There are too many heretics. There are too many unbelievers. There are too many of the lukewarm in our midst. There's too much dissent. That this generation is no longer taking whatever it was, the arts, education, religion. They're no longer taking it. And of course, if they said what I'm about to say, they wouldn't mean it this way. They'd say they're no longer taking it seriously enough. And of course, if we were heroes in some sort of hero comic book, you'd jump from one panel into this panel with them and grab them by the throat and say, "You dumb son of a bitch, listen." I'm saying that figuratively speaking. Listen to what you're saying. And what would happen immediately? Notwithstanding the fact somebody's hands around your throat, they would immediately get very serious. What do you mean I am listening? It is not the loss of morality. It is not the loss of integrity. It is not the loss of motivation. It is not the loss of an aim. The only thing that will collapse a society, and they're always collapsing in the same way that you die, individuals die. The only thing that would destroy it, the only thing that takes the air out of it, and this balloon, this great figure of Snoopy in the Thanksgiving Day parade, the only thing that will do away with Snoopy or Bullwinkle or whoever it is nowadays, the Simpsons, is take the air out. You don't have to say, well, just let the silly part of the air out. Well, so you laugh because you realize, well, that's silly. Air is air. The words, the wisdom, the proverbs, the maxims in the civilized secondary world, may I suggest to you, are not that different. And your mind says, well, that's not true. In other words, I'm saying, you laughed when I said, well, if somebody says, well, just let the silly, let the non-serious molecules of air out, and Bart will still stay blown up and get all the way down through the parade. And you laugh, like, well, that is, what else can you call it? It's silly. You can't, there's no such thing as silly and serious air molecules. You can't go in there and just let out part of them because it's ridiculous to begin with. What if my suggestion was correct, that there's not that much difference between the absurdity of trying to consider that there's serious air molecules and silly air molecules, and that there might be that same relationship, or lack thereof, in comparison, lack thereof, not in the world of morality, all the world of all human ideas. That Proverbs can both be that which inspires men and simply protection for the weak. that maxims can be that which give men assurance, but they can also be that which minimize what appears to be uncertainty. Not cure it, minimize, to quote me. And the last part of this tricycle, this triumphant, was truisms also help hide the truth, which would seem to be the final slap in one's intellectual face to say, well, you have certainly turned words back on themselves and say, well, truisms are for the purpose of helping hide the truth. It can't be. What if it is? Or what if you realize that everything that's said seriously, whatever it is, but most things that are said seriously strike most people as being something worthy of seriousness, like morality, like honesty. That you don't analyze, that's serious stuff. But what if all seriousness is to cover up the fact that what they're talking about, well, I don't know, should we say it? Why not? You got lips and a tongue, all right? What if everything that's serious is treated seriously for one reason? You mean one reason only? What does one reason mean normally? Well, you could say one reason and one reason only. Well, I could, all right? What if things are treated seriously, I hope you're happy, for one reason and one reason only? And what is that? To hide the fact that they're not. You mean I sit here and watch this damn TV for 55 minutes and that's it? Hey, it's free. Well, that's right, cable's not free. I keep forgetting. The joke's on you. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute, the joke's on me. We're not getting paid for this. Now, wait a minute. You had to pay to see this. And I said the joke was on you. Now I said, no, the joke's on me because we're not getting paid. You realize the joke's on everybody except the cable operation? Of course, that's not true if you don't do that. For those of you who don't know, because they're not the ones running the joke. See, they didn't do this as a joke. They've got to do this to get the franchise. Congress, in their wisdom, well, a grand institution, they decided that since cable's the way it is now, circa 1990s, is a monopoly in given areas in our part of the country, in one particular county, I think they do it, or municipality, it is a monopoly. And so the institution, one of our political institutions, nationally decided to help make up for the fact that we're giving them this great monopoly. They're going to have to do something in return to the community. Cable, or public access. So who's the joke on? Of course, then you got to say, all right, so the cable's not doing this out of the goodness of their heart or to help spread this kind of great intellectual information, such as this show and nude wrestling between lesbians or whatever they're having. So we can say we've gone past. You didn't think I changed the subject, did you? And if somebody said, "Are you serious?" No. So at first I was saying, I always like to bring people up to date because it helps kill time. It gives me time to plan what I'm going to say next. That we could say, wait a minute, the joke's on you. You're worried about whether I'm serious or not. Or you mean I spent 55 minutes and I thought, wait a minute, when you started, I got this. And now suddenly I feel like that I have been run down a three-way tunnel that turned out to be an inside straight. That's a cul-de-sac on green felt. And here it is 55 minutes later and you think, wait a minute, I could not be more wrong, except I'm not sure now that I'm seriously wrong. And I said, all right, the joke's on you if you took this seriously. And then, of course, that was being silly. I wasn't serious. No, I wasn't serious. And I said, no, wait a minute. The joke's not on you. All you did was sit there and watch this. And you can say, well, I wasted 55 minutes. The joke's on me. See? And so we was going to go, ha-ha, on you. And then I said, no, wait. The joke would have to be on me because I stood here and did this for 55 minutes and I'm not getting paid. See, and that was after laughing at you when I realized that people do pay for cable. So that's the joke's on me. And I said, no, wait a minute. Then the cable, whoever you're seeing this, wherever city, that, hey, they got the joke on us. And then I point out, no, because they're not doing it because they want to. They're not serious about this. They're doing this because they have to. And who made them have to? So then we said, wait a minute. The joke was really had by Congress because Congress passed it. So I'm continuing to back up so that this will make some sense and you'll see how serious it is that Congress did not sit around and think, what can we do that would be for the goodness of people and ourselves? What can we do to help raise the intellectual, if not cultural level, of our fine country? this was it? If it was. So at any rate, plus you can't say that the joke is on all of us, like from the cable company to me to you, that we're going down in the hierarchy from Congress, because that's not true. Because somebody's playing a joke on them. Who put those bastards up there? Who put them in the most humiliating position in the world? That's why they have to act so serious. And you get all dressed up and come out and make a speech and say, well, here's what I think. I think something that we have got to make some drastic changes, because I was looking back over the original cable bill back from 1969 when we started awarding the franchises, and I've read this bill over carefully, and I say that some changes need to be made. Now, if you don't understand the humor in that, if you still take politics serious, so in case you think, well, wait a minute, it's a conspiracy, and we got all these fat cats up there in Washington, or those of you watching the Ukraine, all those fat cats in Kiev, and you think, boy, the joke's on us going down the hierarchy. No, no, no. It's because you got to be serious to believe that. You got to believe that those people enjoy that they believe they're in charge. No, no, no. Once you see a little bit further, the joke's also on them, because who put them there? Who voted them there? Or if it's a tyranny, who allowed it? How come you didn't go up there and take over? I'm assuming that you got enough sense. You'd rather stay home. You're not that serious. You'd rather sit home and watch cable TV than to go out there in the streets trying to take over the government. I mean, this is dumb and stupid enough to be sitting home watching TV. But at least you can turn around to somebody, at least yourself, and go, hey, what a crock. You know, and you pop another beer and burp or do something obscene and go, you know, to the TV. But if you ended up in a position of authority, you can't do that. You got to be serious. You got to go, God damn, where's my tie? And you got to look straight and say, well, I have some important news. I have some serious news to relay. Well, the most serious, obviously, is we're out of time. Good night, comrades.